Welcome to Mystara for a look at one of the more intriguing militaries of the known world, the armed forces of the Five Shires. They might not be intimidating to look at, unless you can't see them, in which case they're rather intimidating.
Coming out of the goddamn wall! What?
The Hin lack quite a few elements of other militaries. They don't have heavy cavalry or most forms of artillery and are pretty lacking in the domains of magic. What they do have is a particular set of skills they've acquired over a very long adventuring career. Skills that make them a nightmare for invaders like the Glantrians. I'm Mr. Welch, and today we're getting the short end of the stick, the end that goes in the other guy. The first appearance of the Shire's military was in Red Arrow Black Shield, where they numbered just under 7,000 in strength, with a troop class of good and served primarily as archers. They are later revisited in the Poor Wizard's Almanacs, where they get kicked down to troop class fair, but not much else has changed. I never thought of it before, but it's strange that the Almanacs were 2nd edition, but still use the Beckme War Machine stats for all the armies. Goes with the book's reputation for being cut and paste for large portions. Then you look at the expansive view of the Hin with the Gazetteer, and everything mentioned in the previous two gets thrown out the window. Instead of archers, they are now slingers, with 90% of the army using that for their weapons. Bows are restricted to just a handful of warriors, and elite units get mounts to serve as scouts, but not as actual cavalry. It's the Gazetteer where we're gathering most of the information. The Hin differ in their forces because of the Yalar, and the period in their life where they get the insatiable urge to adventure as they become young adults. Because of this, they all have adventuring levels, meaning they all have weapon training and know the business end of a blade. This should make the Hin better warriors than other baseline troops. The rules tend to disagree. Then agree, then go back to disagreeing, then start to agree, then at the end of the thought, disagree again because Mystara has to be difficult. The Shire has 4 military branches, except for the Navy, all depend on how many weekends you are willing to spend marching around the town square. The largest and least capable units are the Militia. These are the equivalent of their National Guard. They train sporadically, but don't expect to see any actual combat unless things are going very wrong. They are purely a defensive force and a reactionary one as well. They don't go out looking for trouble or attempting to prevent it from happening. That's the other guy's job. Literally, the other forces available to the Shires are the ones that nip troubles in the bud. The Militia are there to rally to stop a threat. They aren't needed if there isn't a clear and present danger. Militia units comprise 1,000 Hin and 25 units of 40 Hin each. If the unit is organized and led by an experienced Hin adventurer, it's called a sword. If the unit is led by a clan leader who has rallied the militia to action, it's called a shield. They are typically armed the same, focusing on ranged weapons with spears and pikes, though halflings aren't supposed to be able to use pikes, so assume these are scaled down to their size. Organizing a militia takes time, as the various members have to assemble and equip themselves. Emergencies or attack rarely give anyone enough time for the militia to respond properly. This is why they are the last option when facing various dangers. They typically train once a month in their various villages, practicing simple weapons and how to fight in formations. Unlike other Shire units, this is because the militia prefers to fight in ranks rather than the guerrilla style others train in. They are the closest thing the Shires have to a standing army, if the army was comprised entirely of reservists who never leave the comfort of their hometown. The Fangs are the primary military unit of the Shires and certainly get more of a mention than the militia. They're broken into small units numbering between 25 and 40 and all ride ponies for increased response time or scouting purposes. However, they aren't cavalry and rarely engage in combat while mounted. Higher level halflings lead them, and the rank and file tend to have several adventuring levels. They equip themselves with slings, light spears, short swords, and leather armor for protection. Unlike the militia, being in the Fangs is a full-time position. They act as a rapid response unit, racing to deal with bandits, monsters, or slavers before they can reach targeted areas. While far fewer in number than the militia, they're also better trained and professional soldiers. The standard Fang tactic is to sneak up on the enemy and ambush from every possible angle. As Hin are very good at stealth, this makes them quite effective.
She says the jungle. It just came alive and took them.
They use their talent for not being seen and their ponies to reposition themselves to set up another surprise attack as often as possible. They rarely fight straight up, just one ambush after another until the enemy is dead or routed. Each Fang patrols a particular location in the Shires, familiarizing them with the terrain and any hidden threats or benefits that the surrounding area can provide. They even have different tactics for their ambush, from a single arrow to a feigned retreat while the enemy is being led on a gauntlet under constant fire at every turn. Eventually, the foe will get tired out and retreat or die. Then the Fangs go looking for the next threat. Then you get to the Strikers, the Hin military unit that doesn't officially exist. Striker groups vary in numbers, equipment, quality, and leadership, but they are all loyal to the Shires. They are made up entirely of former adventurers who have decided to keep protecting the Shires in their own way as long as their way involves violence. They are the most proactive military force in the Shires, and the only one apart from the Navy that will take action outside the borders and actively search for trouble. Strikers don't recognize national borders if a threat to the Shires is involved. This can create all sorts of international incidents, but as long as the Strikers restrict their actions to common enemies, they can be smoothed over. Unfortunately, one of their most popular targets is Baron von Hendrix, which makes for awkward diplomatic messages from Duke Stefan. Officially, in the laws of the Shires, strikers are brigands, though in name alone. However, a striker hasn't been prosecuted for crimes related to their freelance actions in memory. The various sheriffs tolerate them to a certain degree and will often leak information on suspected humanoid activities for them to handle. They are more like privateers on land. As long as they operate within allowed parameters, everyone turns an eye. They have no set tactics, preferring to keep all their options open. As former adventurers, they bring their own equipment and tend to be better armed than any other military force. They do lack cohesion with other Shire military units. They just do what they want. This means they are fantastic at dealing with threats before they can form, but they're almost impossible to coordinate when an organized front is needed for a more significant military action. Then you get to the Shire Navy, or what passes for it. The halflings have few enemies on the ocean, as much of their cargo tends to be food goods, making pirating their ships a lesson in cost-loss analysis. There are monsters, and a few pirates prefer to raid various towns for more profitable goods, but few people target the Shire's merchant ships out of choice. Their vessels are slow but sturdy, perfect for defense rather than interception. The official navy consists of 2 war galleys, 4 somewhat out-of-date large galleys, 2 smaller but more recently built galleys, and a dozen sailing ships of varying quality. They can commandeer another dozen ships out of the dry dock or mothballs if necessary, but for that to happen, things are getting really desperate. The 2 war galleys, the Henrath and the Pride of the Shires, are of Irindi build and held back to deal with approaching threats rather than staying on patrol. The larger galleys stay outside their ports and are little more than floating forts than sailing vessels. They are slow and they can't handle rough seas, but they are armed to the teeth with the best war machines the Shire Navy could afford. The Hen are expert sailors, and ship's crews are as bold as any of the Fangs or strikers found on land. But they lack numbers, and they're outclassed in fleet size and ship quality by everyone else in the known world. They do more than make up for what they lack with an official navy with their pirates and privateers. They don't openly tolerate piracy, but they revel in it behind the scenes. The life of a buccaneer calls back to the natural adventuring spirit of the Shire folk, and they are viewed as heroes by the landlubbers. They have about 120 pirate ships, ranging from barely seaworthy to terrors of the sea. They raid all across the Sea of Dread, targeting Phaeacians in particular. They tend to avoid Darrican and Irindi ships, the former being their closest ally, and the latter outmatching them badly. The halflings that make up the crews are some of their race's most eclectic but hardened warriors. They tend to be of a higher level than other Hen units, except for maybe the strikers. Their chosen weapon, again, is the sling. They close to an enemy ship and rain stones down on the crew before charging across and using their bullet pouches as blackjacks. They have the strange custom of adopting one human or elven woman on each ship as a mascot, often a captive or a rescued maiden. She's considered a good luck charm, and the crew pamper her while she's on board. She's free to leave once they reach port. They're not holding her against her will, but while she's on board, she's well fed, given the finest clothes, and all the foot massages her heart desires. Unlike the ground forces, the pirates have little need for crew of other races except for their maiden. They are naturally suspicious of non-Hen, and male tall folk aren't welcome aboard except as hostages to be ransomed off later. To make matters worse for the hostages, all the ships are built to Hen scale. While their forces are formidable on their own, they do lack several strategic options because of their smaller size. They're all light fighters. They lack arcane magic. They possess no war machines except for some of the militia. They rarely use cavalry, and even then just ponies. Enter their auxiliaries, comprised of various adventurers living in the Shires. These individuals are often relatively high level and enjoy living out their retirement in peace and quiet, but they will put on their armor or grab their wands to deal with threats to their tranquility. These volunteers will always be found when the Fangs are strikers, as the militia is too slow to respond, and the Navy and the pirates, by tradition, never trust more than 3 tall folk at one time. They're often old friends with a veteran Hen and tag along to practice their skills, to stave off boredom, or just out of friendship. The Hen are naturally distrustful of strangers, but if one of their own is willing to speak for you, you're automatically part of the band. If not, you've got some work to do, especially if you're a Glantrian wizard or a dwarf. The Shires is known for being an idyllic place with no threats, but that's only by people who don't understand the various perils awaiting the Hen. Glantrian wizards still raid for captives, always trying to discover the secret to the denial power. This does create problems for them when the entire force that is hell-bent on repelling them can sabotage their spells. A sizable humanoid population is found in the mountains, keeping the Fangs busy at all times of the year. Fort Doom likes to raid East Shire fairly frequently, and the strikers in that region love to return the favor. On top of that, there's the constant threat of monsters from both the Malfegi and Blight swamps that keep the various defense forces on high alert. That's the military units of the Shires. They're not invading anyone, except maybe the strikers if the meat is particularly stout, but they make for good adventure hooks with their unorthodox tactics, and the fact that you can join up with them if they trust you. They can also serve as the proverbial cavalry if the party finds itself in a fight where they're badly outmatched near the Shires. Salvation can arrive in the form of multiple well-aimed slingstones coming from everywhere at once. Next up, as I try to get my holiday-disrupted timeline back to normal, we're looking at the Ambassadors of Karamikos, a collection of some of the most varied plot hooks possible. Until then, remember, shoot low, Sheriff. They're riding Shetland ponies.